Guys, gals, and non-binary pals, welcome to the episode that no one wants you to hear by all accounts.
Every teenager from the mid 2000s, every teen from the late 90s
absolutely
doesn't want you to hear. I'm trying to think of who our demographic is for this particular episode.
Well, like that's certainly me, a teen from the early 2000s. This story in this movie was a big part of my life,
and not mine at all. But I'm thrilled. I'm a big yuppie, and I have been since I was a small child.
You were 14. It's Monkeys and Playbills, y'all. I'm Paul.
I'm Jill.
This is a show about Broadway musicals that had runs of 100 performances or fewer on Broadway.
And what the heck happened?
And today we're talking about Almost Famous by Cameron Crowe and Tom Kitt, based on the Oscar-winning movie written and directed by Cameron Crowe.
And it was almost good.
Almost good is how I know this.
I don't know.
That is kind of how I feel about... Okay, here, we'll get into it. I think the first thing that's worth saying is that this is going to be, and we've done this a couple times now, I think, in the history of this podcast, this is going to be a slightly looser episode of the musical. The reason for this is we don't live in New York. We don't have the cash to be going to see these shows live every other week. So a lot of the time, these shows that run less than 100 performances on Broadway will just pass us by. In this case, we didn't see Almost Famous on Broadway, and there is virtually no documentation of Almost Famous, either from its promo department or from fans of the show. So we did what we could.
So I'll give us the dates, and then we can kind of get into maybe a bit of like the history of this.
Yes, great.
The source material.
I love it.
Wonderful. Almost Famous previews began at the Bernard B. Jacobs Theater on October 3rd, 2022. It opened November 3rd, 2022, and it closed January 8th, 2023, after 30 previews and 77 performances. So we're almost at the 2-year anniversary of the first preview, nearly.
Yeah, sure. So it was one on the forefront of the great coming back.
That's right.
And from what I understand, a big part of the writing, like this was in development before COVID, but a big part of the writing on the version that we checked out happened during the pandemic.
That's right.
Like this was Tom Kitt and Cameron Crowe's passion project during the pandemic.
Absolutely, because when you have nothing to do, what do? You create something.
Absolutely.
You make something.
Yeah.
Or you beat your source material to death, ?
Yeah,
no, I think I mean
revisit
too sassy.
But like a little bit. I mean, we're going to have to show our hands eventually, and I think we feel similar in that this is a weird adaptation of an iconic movie, certainly, but I think a weird movie to adapt.
Yeah, it's definitely a movie that elicited a lot of strong feelings from a lot of, I think, young folks specifically, right, at that time. And so there is this feeling of, is maybe that audience is now old enough to be the ones going to the theater, to be spending that money. I don't know. I assume that was kind of the thought process. I'm not sure.
Makes total sense. Like I am that demographic. The movie was really big for me when I was a teenager. It was very important. I revisit the movie now. We watched it again last night. First time I'd seen it in a few years. I have a lot more trouble with it now than I think I did when I was...
didn't hold up maybe necessarily.
Seeing things from a different perspective. You know, that movie presents things through the perspective of a 15-year-old.
Yeah,
and that's
absolutely.
really appealing when you're 15.
Yes.
And that's really tough when you're 35.
It's a very good point, actually, because... Okay, so first of all, maybe I'll ask you a little bit about what you remember feeling when you watched it as a teen and why it sort of, I mean, you alluded to that just now. Like,
it was...
The perspective maybe was important.
Yeah, it was really exciting to see a depiction of like life on the road as a professional musician. Already at the time, that was something that was really appealing to me.
Right.
That era, and the movie presents a very romanticized view of that era.
Absolutely.
Is very appealing to a teenager who's just starting to figure out about, music and free love and hippy dippy bullshit and whatever.
Yep.
And also for a 15-year-old, it's a story about a 15-year-old who gets to go on the road with a band and falls in love with a freaking like the girl of his dreams.
Right.
And without that caught me up so much that I certainly was not, or maybe didn't even have the critical faculties at the time to like engage with it critically.
Sure.
But that was certainly what like swept me up at the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I'm like a 29-year-old adult woman that's like, get away from him.
Who is that?
He's way too old and you're way too young.
Who's talking?
Oh, it's me, Producer Daff. Hi, friends.
Oh, hey, Producer Daff.
Hi.
Thrilled to have you join us today.
To talk about the dangers of having sex with minors. Don't do it. Hot take from Monkey
Hot
Playbills.
take. Was it your first time watching this film?
No, Paul had introduced me to the movie because like he loves it. I didn't really have a relationship with it at all, but it is like it smells so much like a movie written and directed by a dude. Like it is a teenage wish fulfillment fantasy of what we all wish our teenagehoods were like. And
yeah.
And by all accounts, Cameron Crowe's was that. Like he
got to live a version of that. Absolutely.
Okay, so what about you there, Jill? This was not a part of your.
No.
You did not grow up as a
free spirit.
I was gonna say like acne-ridden rock and roll greaseball.
No, I was nerding out about musicals,
I was gonna say, yeah.
And for whatever reason, this didn't seem like a musical to me. You know, because it could maybe straddle the line of like, oh, it's about music and therefore it might draw a similar audience.
But its relationship with music is very different from a musical.
Yes.
And it's not about the performing arts the same way like non-musical music movies like Fame are, for example.
Yes, or a chorus line. Those were the ones that really drew me was like that are the artist experience and not the voyeur, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Which kind of like is...
Bookmark that for later. That's a central part of my feeling about this whole piece.
Okay, great. So I watched it once, probably as a teen or young adult, because I have a memory, and I could be wrong, but I think my sister loved this movie.
Yeah.
She was very much like an alt gal. I don't know how to describe how she was as a teen, but definitely like more interested in that specific lifestyle. She's also very much Stevie Nicks like as a human now. Like she's very cool. She's very cool human.
There is the kind of the fashion and the band-aids all kind of have an incredible sense of fashion throughout that movie and kind of well, I mean, it's presented that lifestyle is presented in a very romantic way, even if you look at it now and you're like, why are teenagers like idolizing this? That's a rough way to live.
And I was never like, I'm a creature comforts kind of gal. So like, I want a warm bed. Do not put me on a bus.
Even then, life on the road was like, no, thank you.
Yeah. Like, it's comfort first. I'm a Taurus. Yeah. Sorry. So that means that a movie like that, where you're sort of not sure what the plan is ever, like that, I don't know. I just never really felt close to it. I asked Dora Carroll, because we're currently sharing a dressing room. Lovely. And I asked Dora because I mentioned we were going to do this. Dora's been a longtime listener and a good friend. So I was like running it by her. And of course she was like, oh, that movie was incredible to me. And then I had to ask why. And she said it was the freedom, like the freedom of that lifestyle as a teen. If you're feeling maybe boxed in by something, that was kind of the thing that she identified as being very magnetic about that.
I love that.
Yeah. So that's helpful for me to hear from other people, like what made it special to them at that time.
Did you give it a rewatch now, or has it only been?
No, I did not.
So it's still been like since you were a teenager.
Yeah, how long has it been? Well, I'm sure I watched it as a young adult, though.
Oh, yeah,
to try to like go at it again. And I think I probably still had similar feelings, clearly, because it didn't change my mind too much. I've just always been who I am.
The other interesting thing about this choice as a adaptation is it's not an especially plotty story.
Right.
Like it's very rambling. It's kinda...
And like, what are the stakes other than the circumstance, which is like, don't find out I'm a minor? Right?
He's got to get the story done. He's got to get get his story written for Rolling Stone.
Okay, but
even then, that's not real. That's all just a joke.
If I may.
Yeah, please.
Part of the stressful circumstance of I'm a minor, I don't want anyone to find out I'm like 15, 16 years old or whatever.
Totally.
Versus getting the story done. If you don't get the story done, you can just be like, oh, by the way, I'm 16. That's why I can't get the story done. Like, do you know what I mean? Your stressful circumstance is also you're out. So,
but it's that kind of thing that's really stressful when you're also 15.
Sure, because you don't know how to be honest in that way.
I would totally get in over my head,
right?
And just have Rolling Stone chasing after me for an article all of a sudden.
We've all watched Dear Evan Hansen. We know how this kind of loop of, I don't want to call it dishonesty, but maybe avoidance is like avoiding saying the real thing.
Cool that you mentioned Evan Hansen as well, because of the choice they make to make William Miller the central character here.
Yes.
Such a, like, his musical voice is so similar to Evan Hansen, to the textures that Pasek and Paula use in Evan Hansen.
Absolutely.
It occurs to me, maybe people don't know the plot of this. Maybe we should just step back real quick.
Why don't you tell it
real quick? Almost Famous is about a young man who grew up in a really conservative household raised by a single mom. and he's got a rebellious sister who turns him on to rock music. And also his mom skipped him a few grades in school, so he's 15, but he's done high school. And he's like a really bright kid, so he ends up snagging a gig as writing an article on an up-and-coming band called Stillwater for Rolling Stone. He's got to go on the band with Stillwater. He meets all the people who are along for the ride, the band, their staff, the fans, including a young woman named Penny Lane is her moniker, who he falls in love with. And she's got a kind of a romance going on with the lead guitar player. And the whole story is just kind of them on the road going from town to town and the experiences that they have there.
Yeah.
It kind of, like, events big and small happen, but there's not really rising action. Hey, we saw it last night, Daph.
Yeah, it's like, it's a road movie. So, like, all of the plot developments are, like, character-based. And, like, so not a lot is literally happening.
Right.
And, like, the big climax of the movie is when William's done writing his article and gives it to Rolling Stone. But then the movie keeps going for, like, half an hour after that.
Yeah.
And would you consider the remaining half hour like the denouement to something, but it's like there's nothing to come down from? Do you know what I mean?
It's definitely like tying up loose ends, like character loose ends. They're just not interesting enough to really give that much time to, at least in my opinion.
And you called them band-aids, right?
Yeah, I think that's the term in the movie. That's a whole bit from the movie, and I think the music, and I know the musical as well.
Yeah.
We're not groupies, we're band-aids.
Exactly.
Groupies just sleep with rock stars. We inspire songs.
And also, like, William's, like, very careful to be like, hey, you need to stop calling these women your groupies.
Yeah.
That's, like, kind of a derogatory term for, like, what they're doing and, like, the support that they're offering you.
So Gus... our puppy Gus is literally up on Jill looking her ear right now.
And Maple is under my legs, too. How are you 5 already? You're so right? Cute. Hi, Maple. Maple's down here, too. I've got all the animals.
So you can see the impetus, I suppose, because you mention movies like Fame. Like, Fame keeps on coming to mind because that's another musical people always used to be like, hey, this is about music. You're a musical kid. You'll like this, you know?
Yeah.
Was way too young to watch Fame when I first watched Fame. Was way too young to watch Almost Famous when I first watched.
I think we could say that about most things we consumed at that time, right?
Rocky Horror Show.
Absolutely. Yeah. But it is formative and important.
They helped me figure out a lot of stuff about myself.
So I will be showing Sully Rocky Horror tomorrow for her first birthday.
Perfect. So you can see the impetus in that way, I suppose, of like Almost Famous is another famous like movie for music lovers.
Yes.
That said, that's what I kind of think is the most confusing thing about this musical. At least when I gave it a listen, one of the things this musical does have is a nicely fully recorded, fully produced cast album.
Yes.
Well, the line between what music is diegetic and what is non-diegetic is so shaky.
Yes.
That I think it takes away a lot of the impact of the movie. That impact of these are the musicians and these are almost the voyeurs.
Yeah.
These are the other music or music loving folks who exist to support this. And there's something lost in that power when they're all 6 singers.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
that makes sense.
There's something that just doesn't quite connect for me when Penny Lane is belting it out just as good as anyone in Stillwater.
Yeah, because then you're like, oh wait, why aren't you the lead singer of your own band?
Yeah.
Or when freaking William got an incredible soaring tenor voice, which he has to have as the central character in a musical.
And then like this morning we were watching a clip of them performing Tiny Dancer, which is like
that old snooze fest. I love that song. I love Elton John and I love Tiny Dancer.
I think that scene in the movie is a really moving thing where they're all
they're all on the road. They're having like there's been a bit of strife within like in the ranks.
They've just recovered. The lead guitar player went to a house party in one of the towns and did a bunch of drugs and like fell off
so
the
many
roof.
Drugs.
Yes.
Fell off.
And he's like
fell off.
In my opinion, that sequence is one of the ones I like most in listening to the musical. That house party sequence.
Yes, I
think
agree.
It's funny.
It is silly. It's very silly. Musical theater. Very campy. It is very actually.
Yeah. I think tellingly, when we've removed any kind of, there's not supposed to be any rock music involved with this. You know what I mean?
In the movie, it's this like really sweet sequence where like you're singing along to the radio with your friends. No one is especially on key or on pitch, but that doesn't matter. And there's charm in that.
Yeah.
Because only one of these people is a professional singer.
Right.
But in the musical, there's like all of these riffs and like beautiful voices. And I'm like,
stunning voices.
Who invited you to karaoke? Like, no.
It's so true. It really does kind of take you out. Or maybe it doesn't take you out. Maybe it doesn't even invite you in. Maybe that's the difference. Where it's like, I'm not pulled out. I'm just not interested in like the variety of offerings of these people because they're not that different from one another, like skill wise.
I would take it even a step further. I agree completely. I would take it a step further and say it's like, why do they don't need Stillwater to bring music into their lives. So why do they hang around with them anymore? You know what I mean? There's always this thing in the movie of like rock stars are dicks, but they bring this thing that you just need to be around. If everyone's got music in there, like if everyone can riff, why are you sticking around with the dicks?
I guess the other thing too is like the allure of that lifestyle. But if they're already there, like it's not like, oh, let's follow Penny Lane through like her life to getting to this point. Like that's a pretty cool narrative I'd like to explore of like what brings a person to a situation like that. Or if we maybe did a bit more of that character study.
Like William finds that out. I think we still use William as the framing device as a journalist.
Totally. I'm curious.
It's a bit of the Forrest Gump problem where this like manic pixie dream girl woman is like filtered so heavily through the experience of the guy that's in love with her. And you're like, cool, I want to know if she's going to be okay.
Right. So the synopsis you gave is pretty much what I found on Wikipedia, which is the musical is about a teenager who becomes a journalist for Rolling Stone magazine in the 70s, based loosely on Crow's life, period. The end. Which is like, that's the synopsis.
Like pretty much like things, like I said, things happen. There's events. Some are funny where the lead guitarist takes too many drugs. Yes. A lot of people taking too many drugs. Because then there's another one. Penny Lane takes too much drugs and she almost dies. And it's very sad.
Yes, exactly.
But she takes the bad kind of too many drugs, not the fun kind of too many drugs.
Hard lesson learned.
Okay.
Rock and roll.
That is not good. A fine line.
Yeah.
Fine line there.
Should we talk about Tom Kitt a little bit?
I think you should talk about Tom Kitt as much as you want.
Okay, so here, let's start there actually. Because one way or another, like I can understand Tom Kitt being maybe a little polarizing, but we've all encountered him. He's pretty big in Broadway music in the last 15 years.
Absolutely. I might argue he's one of the contemporary sounds of musical theater because when I hear a lot of the contemporary shows we talk about, he's actually arranged them.
Absolutely.
Or orchestrated some too, right?
Orchestrates a lot, arranges a lot, MDs a lot. Is still a fantastic MD and conductor. Yeah. I'd say has the career a lot of like musicians who work in theater would like to have.
Yeah, the balance of like actually participating actively in creation, but then
also getting to be that second circle
a book
creative.
Show.
Yeah, absolutely.
As well, yeah.
I think it's obvious he's a exceptional collaborator. Collaborators kind of seem to be drawn to him. For both short and long-term projects.
Right.
I want to make sure you do use a lot of superlatives because he is one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Tom Kitt. We just saw, Daph and I just made our way down to the UK this past summer, and we saw the remount of Next to Normal, the UK, the West End production of Next to Normal, Tom Kitt's Tony-winning, Pulitzer Prize-winning show with Brian Yorkie, which is one of my favorite musicals of all time.
It's an excellent show.
An excellent musical.
Fun fact, during the run of the show that we did last year, Afterlight, which Paul was the orchestrator on, right after the show, a friend of ours and colleague, Paul Rotterman, came up to him and said, "So you like Next to Normal, huh?"
Yeah.
Because your giant musical boner for Tom Kitt was that obvious in the choices that you had made.
Well, and it's also Afterlight is a show with themes of light and darkness, and that's something that Tom Kitt and Brian Yorkie play with a lot.
They really did.
Next to Normal, themes of light and darkness.
Yeah.
Also in this, and what I'm getting at is there's a lot of this, and I think Tom Kitt's writing his ass off.
Yes.
A lot of the stuff that's not like specifically 70s sounds a lot like Next Normal. And I'm not even just being like,
no, I agree.
That guy. Like the finale sounds like Light.
Yes.
Like it sounds a lot like it.
The other thing I noticed is that it seemed to be, how do I say this? So when I listen to his orchestrations and arrangements, I feel like they sound like him. Like, I'm like, oh, I know your voice.
Absolutely.
Sometimes in this show, I hear that coming through. And then sometimes I feel like he's been influenced by other things that are currently on. So I hear a lot of, oddly, some of the Hadestown stuff.
Yeah.
I hear certain motifs or crunchy things where I'm just like, oh, this gives me pause to be like, oh, I wonder if maybe there's a shift in what we're excited about. And there's nothing wrong with that, but just Tom Kitt being aware of what's happening and the change that's happening in contemporary musical theater arranging and kind of going with that. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I think that's a very, very astute observation. Someone I want to draw attention to is a longtime collaborator of Tom Kitt's, and I think one of the creators of this sound. It's a woman named Anne-Marie Milazzo, who's a vocal designer.
Oh.
Who vocal designed Next to Normal. I remember first getting the, one of the big things she did, and when it was first really exciting, she vocal designed the original Spring Awakening.
Oh, yes.
And
okay,
this idea of like all these, we're not thinking of vocal arrangements. I'm sorry, yeah, Daph?
Sorry, Paul, I'm a dum-dum. What is a vocal designer?
Well, here, no, that's actually exactly what I was getting to. So
thank you.
This idea of like, typically in vocal arrangement, as in any arrangement, we kind of, the traditional way of looking at things is looking at things kind of horizontally on a staff and writing parts that interact with each other. These are fundamentals that are drilled into us in music school as musicians. Spring Awakening came out, and anyone who's music directed Spring Awakening can tell you it's a bit of a mindfuck. Because
anyone who has sung an alto line actually would probably agree.
Yeah, 100%.
On that, like an alto line in that show, I mean.
And the results are spectacular. The vocal arrangements in Spring Awakening are stunning.
Yeah.
So from what I understand, at least what was talked about at the time, was she had this term vocal designer rather than the term that had been used up till then, vocal arranger, because she wasn't sitting down and like working out a vocal arrangement on paper then handing it out for music rehearsal. She was sitting down in this really holistic way and like designing these vocal arrangements with the cast so that they suited their individual voices, so that they were really built. And when you look at the other stuff that she's done, things like the incredible Once on This Island.
The revival.
The revival.
Yeah.
Frankly, this as well, you can hear a lot of the OG Next to Normal in this. All I wanted to do was highlight her, and because she's clearly a very big collaborator, and I think is a very big part of the current Broadway sound. So much so it's surprising she, for example, wasn't the vocal designer on, say, Evan Hansen or Hadestown. Yeah, Hadestown does have a lot of this too.
It does. I think too, though, what you're describing is such a considered way of approaching the voice generally as an instrument.
Yeah.
And it's very cool to hear you talk about her and how that actually maybe did lay the foundation for what we've come to expect from contemporary musical theater.
I'd call her a major player in it, at least, just
That's
as worth mentioning as Tom Kitt or Pasek and Paul.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you for that. So can we talk, sorry, I don't want to, but can we talk a little bit about how, yes, we have Tom Kitt and Cameron Crowe doing music and lyrics, respectively. And then we also have jukebox elements.
Very bizarre. So we've got a song, like for the original movie, Nancy Wilson of Heart wrote a bunch of the music for the fictional band
Wasn't
Stillwater.
she married?
Because she was married to Cameron Crowe at the time. Correct.
That's so wild.
And then, I think Peter Frampton wrote a song or two, but like Fever Dog.
Old Reliable.
Yes, right.
I don't know.
So the one from the movie, the original song from the movie, is the Ann Wilson song, Fever Dog, their, whatever, the band's big hit.
Yeah.
But then there's also a bunch of songs from the time. There's Tiny Dancer, which is like the big featured song from the scene everyone remembers in the movie, is like producer Daph said, is kind of totally revisioned as just a straight down the middle musical theater end of Act 1, which feels very bizarre.
The thing I started to identify was that there is a inauthenticity that comes from using the music of the 70s in a show about the 70s alongside music that was written in the 2020s that's being shoehorned into the 1970s.
Right.
Like there is just a difference in the voice.
Yeah.
And it sort of feels like we're imitating rather than writing something new and authentic.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Also, it's so funny that you know immediately what year it is, not because of the sound of the show, but because they just tell you right away. It's not, I was about to do a Merrily We Roll Along joke. 1973. But they kind of do that. They do their version of that.
The first song's 1970. It's called 1975, right?
1973.
Is it 1973?
I think. Oh, now I could be wrong.
Whatever it is.
That reminds me, in an absolutely genius bit of marketing from the Almost Famous team. Not that I would endorse anyone looking up a bootleg. Don't do it. It's illegal. But when you Google Almost Famous Broadway bootleg, what comes up is this like the EP they released called the 1973 Bootleg as like kind of a tongue-in-cheek,
that's
cheeky,
great.
like it's like a bootleg recording from like the band on the road, and it's like, you search engine optimization motherfuckers. That's genius.
What? That is genius. And they had a pretty decent Instagram too, I'll say.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
Well,
didn't mean to derail.
70s.
Was it 1973, in fact?
I didn't actually look.
Come on, Paul.
I'm
I thought
sorry,
that's what you
y'all.
were
I
doing.
I just sat there vibing with you guys. It is called 1973.
Oh, you know what, Kate?
Yeah.
Sorry, but would it be cool to see Almost Famous backwards?
Almost Famous, we roll along.
But like,
So we start with
the
William Miller publishing an article in Rolling Stone about famous band Stillwater.
yeah,
And then
we track backwards to like how everybody got there.
it's certainly, I think, a more compelling way to, because Merrily, when you actually think of Merrily frontways, it's also not very plotty.
Yeah, no, not really.
Like
It's
that's kind
really
of the only,
just
that's the
about
only
those
way a show
friends.
like that can work. If it's going to be too plotty,
Yeah,
your audience is going to be lost.
right.
Very interesting.
Anyway, I'm not saying we should,
Yeah.
but it just occurred to me that if there isn't much quote unquote action,
Yeah.
then what are other devices you can use to kind of illustrate that it is a worthwhile story to tell? Which again, we can talk about whether it is anymore at the end, but
Yeah. I think y'all both hit on a really astute point, which is exactly that, is that, like, as we were talking about, we have this music staff working on it, this brilliant music staff who are some of the voices in contemporary musical theater.
Yep.
Doing an adaptation of just the biggest throwbacky, like, nostalgia piece. And so there is something very incongruous about William Miller's inner monologue sounding like Evan Hansen.
Right.
Not because I
Right.
don't like that sound, it just sounds so contemporary.
Yeah.
Like, that sounds so present day.
I'm thinking about the orchestration.
Also weird because it's a rock band, but then it's got Tom Kitt's favorite string trio.
Yeah, I was going to say.
which is not a bad thing. It's a cool thing. I like it a lot. But man, that's another thing where you listen to the end of the show and you're like, this is next to normal. We need some light. You know what I mean? This is
So that's an interesting voice
yeah.
in the way that this show sounds, for sure.
For a thing about like 1970s rock bands.
Yeah, like to me it needs to sound tinny.
Yep, absolutely.
Right? And gross, like kind of
Gross,
dirty.
lots of electric guitars.
So
lots
much
of
electric
guitars.
guitar.
Yeah.
Guitar generally,
Yep.
sometimes with broken strings.
Yeah, like exactly.
Yeah.
Instead
I
of
don't
being
know, that's-
really
yeah.
piano, like this really contemporary piano-driven sound.
Yes.
Which I like a lot.
love, but maybe not in this moment. I don't know. I'm so
Like, there's no
Yeah.
keyboardist in the band, right?
Right.
In Stillwater, no. Yeah.
no.
So that's a weird choice. Like, if we're gonna lean into the blending of the diegetic and the non-diegetic,
yeah.
Or it should sound like Elton John, Billy Joel
Right.
keyboard, you know? Like
yes.
the
Rock
people who were
keyboard.
playing keyboard at that time.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I also think, and let me know if this is a hot take, Cameron Crowe may not be a very good writer and is certainly not a good lyricist.
Gasp.
A lot of the lyrics in this show are really tough, you guys.
Yeah.
They're really tough to swallow.
Yeah, I think I can agree with that.
With all due respect to Cameron Crowe, I always try to leave these podcasts like the people are going to listen to it. And Cameron Crowe, I have a complicated relationship with a lot of your movies. I like some of them.
Yeah.
I think the lyrics to the show are bad. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
but I think they are.
Do you think? Okay, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
How? Because some of the reviews.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this.
And
So
maybe-
some of the reviews talk about how it feels like they just took the movie and put it on stage, like almost identical text.
That's certainly the way it seems.
Yeah, the way it's like kind of sounding, at least. I wonder if that's also the fault of that because you go, oh, you can't really, we've learned, just take a movie and just put it on stage with a few changes, you know?
In general, it kind of scratches one of my big problems. I'm not sure how you feel about this, but like, and this is especially recently, there's been a few adaptations of movies that I am really hold beloved in my heart, like
Yes.
Back to the Future or Beetlejuice or
Yeah,
something.
which we can talk about as they relate to this, but
Yes, absolutely. And when it's done well, in the case of like, say, a Beetlejuice, they really don't touch a lot of the things that I find super charming about the movie and
Right.
kind of make their own things that are similar in attitude and
Yeah.
in like vibe, but are very removed. Like Beetlejuice, the musical, is very removed from the Tim Burton's movie.
yeah, it's like a send up of the
Yeah.
movie. At least to me, I remember it feeling that way.
Absolutely. Whereas I like it always kind of puts my teeth on edge when I hear like a quote from the movie and it's become a song and you can just hear the producers being like, and that can be a song, and that can be a song.
Yeah. And you're like, oh, but are we going to talk about whether the stakes are high enough for a song? And I Am a Golden God is a song. Exactly. Rather than approaching it from a story perspective, it's, oh, freaking the flux capacitor can be a song, the Doc Brown sings or whatever. And I'm like, it's everything that everyone makes fun of for musicals. Yeah. Like, no, you're right.
The most pretentious version of myself goes like, we should be striving to move the art form ahead rather than basking in friggin' 1.17 gigawatts or whatever, the musical, you know?
I like both options, but they just have to be good and considered.
Yeah. Well, like,
that's all.
Do you have a movie that's been adapted into a musical, like a movie that you really love that's a musical?
Okay. I always come back, oddly, to Mary Poppins.
Sure.
The way that it was adapted from film to stage, I think was done really well. And even though it's like obviously very different from what we're discussing right now, it always jumps out to me as like, oh, that was like one of the ways that they did a good job.
I agree 100% they return a lot to the book.
Yeah.
And take like half inspiration from the book, but also, so you get these iconic moments. Mm-hmm. But they're all framed slightly differently.
Yeah.
Chim Chimmery's a little bit different. Spoonful of Sugar is just a little bit different.
Yeah.
So you don't have that thing of like, oh, that's too obvious.
Yeah.
You know?
Right. So I really like that. I'm curious if you can tell me how you're like in your prep of Frozen. Have you noticed if it's one of those good ones?
Yes, I super have, and it super is.
Okay, great.
Actually, I've kind of done things backwards where I hadn't seen the movie until a couple of weeks ago.
That's a good thing, I think, ultimately.
And we saw it on the West End before I'd seen the movie.
Good.
So I feel very good about it. I'm coming at it like as this is the story of the musical. This is the story we're telling. It super did.
Yeah.
In the sense that it focuses the story even more on Anna and Elsa than the movie does.
Perfect.
Kind of acknowledges, oh, maybe we don't need all this stuff about Kristoff, so we can just kind of, but still I think does justice to his character.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, though. And in a lot of ways cuts, because also Frozen's kind of a road movie. They travel a ton.
Yeah.
And make some very smart cuts. And like they do travel, but the traveling's a smaller part and they get back to the castle faster. All sorts of smart things to make it work on stage. Mm-hmm. Or as I would argue, this one, maybe by adapting it literally, especially a show about where the whole point of the movie is they're constantly on the road.
Right.
I don't know. From what I understand, this show also kind of like didn't navigate those challenges well.
Right.
There's not much set to speak of from what I understand.
Yes, this is what I've read. It seemed like, at least the reviews that I read were not very complimentary of the sets or lack thereof.
Well, maybe it's time let's talk about reviews a little bit. We're not the only people who maybe had some notes.
So I read like a few things. Yeah. I read a review in The Guardian by Adrian Horton. I read a review in Vanity Fair by Frank Rizzo. Sure. I read a review by Jesse Green of The Times. Yeah. So I wanted to kind of like, and the first one I read was, I think, the Vanity Fair one, and it wasn't mean. It was just like, pretty matter of fact about things, but I don't remember it feeling like scathing. Sure. But then the Times, of course, was. And apparently, I don't know much about Jesse Green's style, but I found myself on a Reddit post that was talking about that review.
I think I saw that one.
Yeah, and they were
like Jesse Green just destroyed.
Yeah, they're like, why is he still reviewing theater? So then I kind of was trying to take it all with a grain of salt to be like, okay, we weren't there, so we don't know for sure, but it's basically lukewarm is what I would say the reviews overall were. The thing I loved from the Vanity Fair review was that they talk about William as a character as, quote, Crow's stand-in and a kind of rock and roll Pippin, which I thought was very silly. I didn't really get that vibe.
I would say rock and roll Pippin is maybe a better angle that could actually make this work a little bit more.
Right? And then also brings me to, do we need another story about a directionless boy? Like, sorry,
directionless white dude?
No, I agree. And like, it ties so much into like the whole manic pixie dream girl problem of like, Penny Lane really doesn't get to be a person at all.
Yeah. It's true. They do give her a song in this called Morocco, where she talks about how she just wants to go to Morocco. And I'm like, oh, good. Okay, so there's like a dream there, but it's like not fleshed out super well or fully.
And that's once again, like musically, there's a lot in that harmony. I can see a lot of, I can see where Tom Kitt is going. I just think Crow's inexperience as a lyricist means we can't actually get anywhere in
Did
that song.
Did they have anyone else like advising, do you think?
Just the two of them, from what I understand. Which, like,
interesting.
I can see where producers would be okay with it. Crow.
Well, sure.
Crow friggin' won an Oscar for writing.
I know. He's won a ton of awards
absolutely.
and he's written a lot of stuff. So you kind of go, well, yeah, absolutely. A writer should be able to write this. Like, it just makes sense. But
the lyrics are clunky. The rhymes are simple. And a lot of the time they don't even really work.
Yeah. The angle that the Guardian review took was sort of like asking this question of who is this musical for?
Yeah.
And I really like those questions because it helps us understand why maybe it didn't hit the way that they intended.
Who did they think this musical was for?
Yeah. Ostensibly, Paul, this musical was for you.
Yep.
And people like
you.
You would think so. If people who equally worship at the altars of rock music and musical theater.
Right.
If this isn't working for me, who's it going to work for?
Who is it actually for? Yeah. I think it's a very useful thing to ask that you should absolutely be asking at your very first meeting. And I don't want to say that they didn't do that. I don't want, because I think that at least my impression is that they thought it was for us.
And so the whole
30 whatever year olds.
The hopeful ending we end on, hopeful or tragic, depending I guess who you talk to, is that by all accounts they're not done with developing this show. They closed it on Broadway.
Yep.
There's a new workshop going on already. So at least in theory, maybe the hope would be they've realized, wow, this really misses the mark.
Yeah.
Let's go again. Like for whatever, maybe the collaboration is healthy enough that they want to keep working. Which is great.
I think that's great. Like, keep going,
Yeah.
The thing that I always find with, well, I can only speak to Canadian new works because that's what I've been doing. But that thing of like, oh, good, we produced it, it's done. And it's like, no. Like, we need more money because we need to keep developing this. Like first showing, the first full mounting of this production can't be the end.
Yeah. All we've proven is that it works, that it's worth keeping on going with.
Yes.
Okay, so we just had 10 performances to figure out what jokes are not landing, what jokes are really landing, what's not working, when is an audience getting bored and checking out.
Yes.
And like you have to be able to take all of that data into another draft.
Yeah. Yeah. And I am glad that they're pursuing that. Like, they can do whatever they want. I'm not here to tell them not to make this.
Maybe between us, I would be really excited if Tom Kidd also announced he was working on something else.
Yeah, something new.
Yep.
Which maybe that actually would be wonderful.
I mean, he's proven at this point he kind of does do that. He kind of balances big old projects like this with some work on smaller projects.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's very nice. I want to talk a little bit before we go about a couple more things.
Yes, please.
One being the Tonys that year. So I think it would have been 2023 Tony year. This is the first like full year back where like they actually even called it, I think, an oversaturation of the Broadway market because that was the same year of like
all the things that have been developed were ready.
And then they closed immediately because it was like, we actually can't keep up with the volume of stuff that's on Broadway.
Well, I remember this year. This is kind of a piece because this happened last time I was in Halifax.
Yeah.
This is the year that Kimberly Akimbo won, and I was very excited because Janine Tesori is
wonderful.
Just the very best.
Yep.
This is the Shucked year.
Wonderful.
Did you ever check out Shucked?
No.
People liked Shucked a lot.
Yes, and I think I'd like to get to know it. I think I'm ready now.
I would check out Shucked. Yeah, I think I'm ready. I think I'm in a place.
I'm in a place where
I'm ready to open my heart to Shucked.
Yeah.
and Juliet was up, and Juliet's a really cool show. That's
it's
still
running, right?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
That's the year that Parade won Best Revival.
Oh, of course.
With friggin' what's his nuts, our favorite guy.
Our favorite vibrato, Ben Platt.
Where Parade took it over the Sweeney Revival.
That's right. Which actually I think is...
You can buy that?
Yeah, I think I do.
Was that Sweeney Revival? We were all swept up on it at the time.
Yeah, and I mean,
because it looked so cool. The
elements
staging was
of
so
it.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, but I still kind of
And they had that really good Tony performance.
Did the Sweeney Revival with Patty win and Michael Cerveris? Did it win in the 2000s?
Surely.
So then you're kind of like, well, do we need to give it to Sweeney again? I don't know.
That kind of felt like a definitive revival. Maybe that's just because it came out when we were coming up.
Were they all playing instruments?
Yeah, that's the one where they were all playing
instruments. Where
instruments.
Patty played the triangle
and the tuba.
Oh wait, I thought that was company. Didn't she play?
Maybe in company too, but I swear
maybe both.
In her Mrs. Lovett, she plays the triangle a little bit and plays like a couple notes on the tuba.
That's actually kind of fun.
And that's all she plays.
I like that for her.
It's so funny.
I want to be that level.
I know, right?
You know?
Where they're like, we're doing a show where everyone has to play a bunch of instruments, except we need you.
you can pa pa.
Yeah, it's just gonna be a joke. Did you play tuba in high school?
I love it. I love it. I literally love it. Okay, so yes, what an amazing Tony year, and they were nominated for Best Original Score, which is funny because it's made up of half of not their music.
Yeah, That's lot of different people.
That's so wild.
So I found that so funny. It just was funny to me. So that's that Tony year. The other thing that's worth mentioning is that it seems like the new cool thing is taking a piece of nostalgia and making it a musical. So we saw that, like you mentioned, with Beetlejuice, because for a lot of people, it's a nostalgic thing.
Yeah.
We have Back to the Future, which is doing really well and apparently is very fun, very entertaining.
Yeah. Also in this Tony year was Some Like It Hot.
Right.
We were just in the UK where Mrs. Doubtfire is having a really long run.
Interesting.
I know, right?
Wow.
Yeah. Kiss Me Kate.
Oh, God. I can't even talk about that show.
That also
why
had
are
celebrity
we
casting.
Yep, that was stunt casting and also like a real golden age show.
Why on earth are we coming back to Kiss Me Kate of all musicals, right?
It's just so shocking to me. It's like, we're still doing that one? Like, why are we hitting women on stage? But anyway.
Hot takes and look at some Playbills. Don't sleep with minors.
It's not even like that South Pacific where it's like, there's a lot of problems here, but like there's
we're like learning
historical value to it.
I guess, yeah.
Like there's no conversation.
Yeah.
We're all pretty much unanimous on Kiss Me Kate at this point, that there's no point, right? Like there's no value anymore.
And I know that I think Drayton just did it.
Oh, sure.
And I know there was like a concerted effort to maybe make some like gentle changes that were like ways to sort of like reconcile those moments. So then it's like,
is there a version of Kiss Me Kate that works, or is it just that the Taming of the Shrew story is so ingrained
maybe
in
we're
being
just
a problem?
done now.
Yeah. Maybe we're done with that.
So in addition to these pieces of nostalgia, there's another one coming. Okay, it's currently out of town. It's in New Jersey right now, but Empire Records.
Yes.
And I think
let's talk about this.
It really, really connects to this thing that we're talking about, which is like, who is it for? And to me, Empire Records is a very similar audience to that of Almost Famous. They were wearing the same costumes.
Which is like kind of a nicer movie about music and music culture than Almost Famous.
I think
I've only seen it like once.
I think a little more happens. I've only seen it maybe once or twice, but I think a little bit more action happens and a little bit like, I don't want to say like deeper human connection, but I think there's more to mine from that than there is from Almost Famous. So I'm curious about it.
I'd also be curious about the just one best play this past year at the Tonys, Stereophonic.
Absolutely.
Which is a play with a lot of music in it about it's like a 3-hour show about a band recording an album in a studio in real time.
Yep.
Which sounds right up my alley.
Yep.
And by all accounts is like very much like by all accounts, it's doing it right. What Almost Famous is trying to do.
Right.
And it makes total sense when you think about it. Why would a play, you can't tell the story of the road. You tell the story of the studio.
Yes.
It's like a play, you want to tell the story of that cramped, compact, claustrophobic environment.
Yeah, like a kind of like Jean-Paul Sartre's like No Exit, but with guitars.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Which by all accounts, Stereophonic kind of is.
It's Sunday in the Park with George in the 70s, question mark.
Which is what you would hope a musical that talks about the music of the 70s would be.
Well, that's how they describe it on their website, is that it's about the creative process of this band and sort of like when they're at odds and and things like that. And I think that's really fascinating to watch.
Is it like the target audience? We talked about lovers of music and theater being the target audience.
Yeah.
Were they being siphoned off? No, Stereophonic wasn't open at this point. But
no, it wasn't. So this is I guess it's the next season that it opened.
I would call both of those much more successful attempts at this kind of thing.
Yeah.
That I, as identified one of the target audiences, am much more in. Like I would go to New York to check out Stereophonic.
Yeah.
I couldn't be bothered to check out Almost Famous, you know, man.
Yeah, I think there's other stuff that's definitely like that would be higher on my list.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it seems that audiences were receptive to Stereophonic's take on things, and maybe because it's not a thing that existed already. I don't know. I'm just curious about that because last ep we talked about Lempicka, which is new.
Yep.
And as you know, as many things as I might not have like felt were great about it was still a new story, an important story.
And you got to celebrate that. Did we? I hope we celebrated that enough.
I just want to draw attention to longtime listener, friend of the pod, Emma Wellham, who saw Lempicka.
Did she actually?
So she said, Was it perfect? ? Absolutely not. However, the energy in that theater by the time we got to the finale, the cast was giving, like, moved me so deeply that I cried.
Cool.
Yeah. So that's super nice perspective to have, because we often say, like, you have to be there in person to really know what that feels like.
Just by nature, we're missing a critical element in this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
We don't see it live, and these things are meant to be seen live.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this was, Emma says this was before they announced that they were closing. So clearly it wasn't like we're performing because we know the end is coming.
They were still trying to build this thing.
Yeah, exactly. And then she says, it made me want to get in there and try to direct it myself. And I think that's very exciting, because Emma's an excellent director and would be an amazing person to have as a creative voice on that project. But I think...
Yes.
So the fact that it inspired someone to want to do it, I don't want to say better, maybe that's not the language, but to do their version of it.
There is enough here that I feel like with some more work we could get there.
Do we think the same of Almost Famous?
Whenever there's an adaptation of a movie, or like whenever we're going from one medium to another medium, I always just get stuck on why.
Right.
Because if the answer is, we want your money, okay, bad idea, don't do it.
It always is. Like, musical, Broadway is a business.
Yeah, but it's also like, what is gained from this transformation into a different medium?
Yes.
And in here, it sounds like nothing was gained. In fact, a lot was lost.
Yep.
You told the same story, but you don't get the gorgeous shots of, like, traveling across America.
Yeah.
That were, like, half the love of the movie.
Yeah, I get a projected backdrop of autumn leaves.
Yeah.
Cool.
We love.
So, like, to me... Like, I'll say, because Tom, Kit, and Cram and Crow are working on it, and they should keep on working on it, because if they're both cool, creative people.
Yeah.
And if they think they've got a take that kind of turns this piece around a little bit, I'd love to see it. I'd love to revisit it. For my money right now, though, I would, like we said, it feels like there's other people telling this story better right now. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what I'd be more interested in engaging with. Yeah.
Me too. I do want to call attention to the amazing cast, though. Holy could they sing. And the sound design.
Yep. Absolutely.
So clear, so clean. Like the stuff that the clips that I was able to see, they had an amazing curtain call video that was so, like, the sound was unbelievable.
I think Tom Kit's got his people, which makes sense for as like one of the big music people in the Broadway world. I think he's, once again, this ties back to he's got to be a really good collaborator, a good guy. I think good people seem to want to work with him and be around him.
Yes.
And that's clear. And when you hear his associates are good, the show's always well conducted and well, like, put together. The vocals are always so crisp. Yeah. That takes a whole team of people working really hard and working well.
I agree. Yeah. So yay for that.
Yeah.
I sound
I'm
not that mad about it.
No, not at all. It's this is a very sterile way to talk about a show. Mm-hmm. And so there is kind of this weird thing at the end of a conversation like this that's so abstract, and what is the purpose of this?
Yeah.
Of like, but they still, a lot of people were employed on this, and they worked their asses off and made it a beautiful show.
Yes. And I want people to work like a lot or often or whatever. So if this is what that means, then please, like, that should be what you're doing, you know?
Also, there's more work when shows run.
Yes.
You know, so there is part of that as well, of like,
it has to be a good one, I guess.
Yeah.
The other thing, the last thing, let's maybe talk about, let's do our last rating. So should this Almost Famous be a musical?
Not for me. No.
Daff?
It kind of already was.
It was a movie with music.
I also don't think it should be like a jukebox musical, because that's also not really it. It's like, no, this should not be a musical because it was already a movie with music in it.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm cool if it's just the movie.
Yeah. That said, was this production flop, a secret bop, or is it so bad we got to make it stop?
I'm going to say flop, only insofar as, like, we talked a lot about the nostalgia factor of this movie, but, like, maybe I'm wrong just because I have no connection to it, but I feel like the audience for that movie isn't big enough to sustain an adaptation on Broadway.
Right.
Like, I don't know if the Almost Famous stans were clamoring for this to exist.
Yeah.
I don't know, right?
Yeah, true.
The audience response kind of seems to corroborate that as well, you know?
Yeah. Like, the Venn diagram of people who really like Almost Famous and the people who like musicals apparently has a sliver right there in the middle.
Yeah.
And we were more interested in seeing Stereophonic.
I was going to say, and they probably went to see Stereophonic. Yeah, I would say flop. I hope that in their continued work on the piece that maybe it'll turn into a bop.
I hope they crack it.
Yeah.
I would encourage them to try to stray further away from the story they told in the movie to do that.
I think so too. Like explore maybe a slightly different form. I don't know. Yeah, maybe there's a structure change that could really, really be helpful. Yeah. And I don't mean like audience participation. I don't want them coming through the audience.
Yes.
None of that.
Absolutely. An immersive experience. You get on a tour bus.
Okay, now that Sleep No More is closed, what are they doing with that venue?
Oh, there you go. It's the Almost Famous experience.
Yeah.
Okay, but actually, if there was like an immersive thing where it's like we're going to a Stillwater concert.
Oh.
That might be kind of fun.
And then you just see like this 15-year-old kid running around the theater with a notepad.
And you know that's William Miller. Yeah.
Or something. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't think they've cracked the...
But yeah.
The diegesis problem.
Sure.
Once they crack that, I think the musical's going to open up to them in a new way.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be cool? I would love to see something like that.
And I feel like I know why they tried to honor that movie, because that's what people love. They love that source material. So then they're like, well, we want to honor that. And it's like, okay, but maybe the best way to honor it is to send it up or, I don't know, do something a little different.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't have anything particularly amazing to say, but here we are at the end.
I think we got into some stuff. I had a nice time there, Jill.
Yeah, I'm curious if we will get a chance to see Empire Records on Broadway.
I hope we do.
Yeah.
I'd be very interested. This is also probably, it's worth saying, our last episode in person for a little while,
yeah,
which is a little sad.
It is a little sad.
I'm going on the road.
I'm excited for you, though. That'll be great.
We'll probably try to get a couple more done before the end of the...
Yes.
The end of the year,
we
I think.
have plans for a few more
at
least.
Yeah, so stay tuned. Please remember to rate, review, subscribe, tune in next time when we'll be talking about...
Hi everyone, this is producer Daphne speaking. Thank you all so much for listening to Monkeys and Playbills. To learn more about the show, you can follow us on Instagram at monkeysandplaybillspod or email us at monkeysandplaybillspod@gmail.com. You can also support us on Patreon at patreon.com/monkeysandplaybills. Monkeys and Playbills is proud to be a Village Conservatory for Music Theater podcast. Original music for the show is provided by Paul DeGers, and the show is produced and edited by Daphne Finlayson. Before you go, consider checking out the rest of the podcasts in the Village Conservatory family, either at villageconservatory.com, or if you're on Apple Podcasts, you can check out the Village Conservatory channel in the app.